The glow from Laura's phone lit up our bedroom like a cheap motel sign, casting shadows that danced across her face as she typed furiously. 2 in the morning, and my wife was having what looked like the conversation of her life with someone who definitely wasn't me. "Can't sleep again?" I asked, propping myself up on one elbow. The mattress springs creaked, another thing on my ever-growing list of repairs that never seemed to get done around here. Lora jumped like I'd caught her stealing from the collection plate. Her thumb moved lightning fast across the screen, and suddenly the room went dark again. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "Just work stuff," she said, but her voice had that tight quality it got when she was lying. After 8 years of marriage, I knew all her tells. The way she tucked her hair behind her left ear when she was nervous. How she cleared her throat before saying something she didn't mean. The little pause before she answered direct questions. "Work stuff at 2 a.m.? Since when does styling hair require emergency consultations?" She rolled over, putting her back to me. "You're being paranoid, Connor. And clingy. God, you're always so clingy." Clingy. That was a new one. Usually she went with suspicious or controlling. I stared at the ceiling, counting the water stains from last winter's roof leak. 7 distinct brown patches that looked like a map of some country I'd never want to visit. The phone buzzed again. Then again. Laura's breathing changed. Got quicker, more excited. She thought I couldn't tell, but I'd been lying next to her for nearly a decade. I knew the difference between her sleeping breath and her pretending to sleep breath. "Lora." "What?" "Sharp?" "Defensive." "Who's Jay?" The silence stretched out like a guitar string about to snap. Outside, a truck rumbled past on Route 47, probably heading to the early shift at Morrison's plant. Normal people doing normal things while my marriage imploded in real time. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Jay, the person you've been texting every night for the past 2 weeks. The one whose messages make you smile like you just won the lottery." She sat up so fast the bed shook. "You've been reading my messages?" "Hard not to when you're practically sitting on my face with that thing." That's a violation of privacy, Connor. You can't just what? Notice that my wife is having late-night conversations with some mystery person. Notice that you've been coming home later and later. Notice that you flinch when I touch you." Lora climbed out of bed and grabbed her robe from the chair. Even in the dark, I could see her hands shaking. "You're being ridiculous. It's just Jenna from the salon. We're planning a surprise party for Marnie's birthday." "Jenna?" "Right. Jenna, who Lora had complained about for 6 months straight. Jenna, who she said was fake as a $3 bill and couldn't style her way out of a paper bag. That Jenna. Show me the messages then." "No. If it's just party planning?" I said no, Connor. God, when did you become so... She searched for the word like she was digging through her purse for keys. "Needy." Needy. Another new addition to her vocabulary of insults. I wondered where she was picking up these fresh ways to cut me down. Probably from Jay. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up. At 6'2", I had 4 inches on Lora, but she'd never been intimidated by my size. Right now, though, she took a step back. "You know what? You're right. I am being needy. Needing honesty from my wife is apparently too much to ask for these days. Don't be dramatic." "Dramatic?" I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "Lora, you're texting someone at 2 in the morning, lying about who it is, and I'm being dramatic for asking questions?" She crossed her arms over her chest. "I need space, Connor. You're suffocating me." Space. The magic word that every cheating spouse eventually pulled out of their back pocket. Space to figure things out. Space to find themselves. Space to screw around without feeling guilty about it. "Sure," I said, walking to the closet. "You need space? I'll give you the whole damn state." "What are you doing?" I pulled out my duffel bag, the same one I'd used for weekend trips back when we actually enjoyed each other's company. "Giving you what you want." "Connor, don't be ridiculous. You can't just what? Leave? Watch me." I started throwing clothes into the bag. Work shirts, jeans, my good boots, the essentials. Everything else could stay with the house and the mortgage and the woman who thought I was too clingy to deserve the truth. "You're overreacting," Lora said, but her voice had lost its edge. Now she just sounded scared. "Am I? You want space? You got it. All the space you can handle." I zipped up the bag and headed for the door. Lora followed me down the hallway, her slippers making soft shuffling sounds on the hardwood. "Where are you going to go?" "Not your problem anymore." "Connor, please. Let's talk about this in the morning when we're both what? Sober. I haven't had a drink. Rational. I'm being perfectly rational. My wife is cheating on me, lying about it, and telling me I'm the problem. Leaving seems like the most rational thing I've done in months. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the front door. Outside, Mrs. Gerhardt's porch light was on. The old woman was probably watching from behind her curtains, cataloging every detail for tomorrow's neighborhood gossip session. I'm not cheating, Lora said, but even she didn't sound convinced. I turned to look at her one last time. Standing there in her pink robe with her hair messed up and her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline, she looked smaller somehow, fragile. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You know what the funny thing is, Lora? I would have fought for us. If you'd just been honest, if you'd said you were unhappy or confused or whatever, I would have done anything to fix this. But lying, making me feel crazy for noticing what's right in front of my face, that's where I draw the line. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool October air. Behind me, I heard Lora start to say something, but I didn't stop to listen. Some conversations were already over before they started. Mrs. Gerhardt's curtains twitched as I threw my bag into the truck. I gave her a little wave, might as well give her something good to report, and climbed behind the wheel. As I drove away from the house we'd bought together, the mortgage we'd split, the life we'd built, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Relief. 3 hours of driving brought me to a 24-hour diner outside Millfield, where the coffee was strong enough to strip paint, and the waitress looked like she'd seen every kind of human misery at least twice. I ordered eggs over easy and tried to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I left. 17 missed calls from Lora, 12 text messages that I didn't bother reading, and 2 voicemails that could wait until never. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when Mick's name showed up on the screen. Please tell me you didn't actually leave, he said before I could even say hello. Mick Torino had been my best friend since high school and my coworker at Brennan's Auto for the past 5 years. If there was anyone who'd seen this coming, it was him. I left. Jesus, Connor, where are you? Diner outside Millfield, eating eggs that taste like rubber and trying not to think about the fact that my marriage just exploded. What happened? I told him about the texts, the lies, the mysterious Jay who was definitely not Jenna from the salon. Mick listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I appreciated about him. He never tried to fix problems that weren't his to fix. So what's the plan? He asked when I finished. Don't have one yet. Figure I'll drive until I hit a place that feels right, then see if I can find work. You could stay with me and Janet. We've got the couch. Thanks, but no. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it right. Clean break. What about the house? Your tools? All your stuff? I hadn't thought that far ahead. The house was in both our names, but I'd put down the down payment with money from my dad's life insurance. My tools were worth more than my truck. Everything I'd built over the past 8 years was tied up with Lora. I'll figure it out later. Right now, I just need to get gone. After I hung up with Mick, I sat in the diner for another hour, watching the sun come up over the parking lot and thinking about how different everything looked in daylight. The trucker at the next table was arguing with someone on his phone about delivery schedules. The cook was singing along to some country song on the radio. Normal people living normal lives while mine fell apart one text message at a time. I was walking back to my truck when I noticed the black SUV. It was parked 3 spaces down from me, windows tinted dark enough to hide whoever was inside. Nothing unusual about that. Half the vehicles on the road these days looked like they belonged to federal agents or drug dealers. But something about it bothered me. I climbed into my truck and pulled out of the parking lot, heading north on Route 15. The SUV followed. Could be a coincidence. Route 15 was a main road, plenty of people used it, but when I took the exit toward Cooperstown and the SUV did the same, the coincidence theory started looking pretty thin. I'd been a mechanic long enough to know cars, and this one was expensive. Cadillac Escalade, maybe 2 years old, with custom rims and a paint job that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Not the kind of vehicle you'd expect to see tailing a guy in a beat-up Ford pickup. The road curved through a stretch of farmland, and I used the opportunity to test my theory. I slowed down to 45 in a 55 zone. The SUV slowed down too, maintaining the same distance. I sped up to 65. The SUV matched my speed. Someone was definitely following me, but who and why? I thought about Laura's mysterious Jay, about the late-night texts and the lies. Maybe Jay wasn't just some guy she was cheating with. Maybe there was more to this story than a simple affair. Or maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the stress of the past few hours was making me see threats where none existed. The SUV settled the question by trying to run me off the road. It happened fast. 1 second I was cruising along at 60, the next second the Escalade was pulling alongside me, drifting into my lane like the driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. I jerked the steering wheel right, tires squealing as I fought to stay on the asphalt. The SUV corrected course and fell back, but the message was clear. This wasn't about following me anymore. Someone wanted me scared, hurt, or worse. I pressed down on the gas pedal and felt the truck's V8 respond. The old Ford might not look like much, but I'd rebuilt the engine myself, and it had plenty of power when I needed it. The speedometer climbed past 70, then 80. The SUV kept pace easily. Whatever was under that hood, it was more than enough to catch a pickup truck on a straight road. Up ahead, I saw a sign for a rest stop. Gas station, convenience store, probably a few other travelers, witnesses, safety in numbers. I took the exit without signaling, hoping to catch my pursuer off guard. The SUV nearly missed the turn, tires smoking as it braked hard and followed me down the ramp. The rest stop was busier than I'd expected. A couple of 18-wheelers, a family in a minivan, an elderly couple walking a small dog. I parked near the convenience store entrance and climbed out of my truck, trying to look casual while keeping one eye on the SUV. It had stopped at the far edge of the parking lot, engine running. The windows were too dark to see inside, but I could feel someone watching me. I walked into the store and bought a cup of coffee I didn't want, using the time to think. Whoever was in that SUV had followed me for 30 miles and tried to force me off the road. This wasn't road rage or mistaken identity. This was personal. But personal how? I was a mechanic from a small town. I fixed cars, paid my taxes, and minded my own business. The most dangerous thing I'd done recently was confront my wife about her cheating, unless that was exactly the problem. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the text messages Lora had sent. Most of them were variations on the same theme. Come home, let's talk, you're being ridiculous. But one caught my attention. Connor, please call me. You don't understand what you're getting into. What I was getting into? I wasn't getting into anything. I was getting out of a marriage to a woman who'd rather lie than tell the truth, unless she meant something else entirely. I paid for the coffee and walked back to my truck. The SUV was still there, still watching. I climbed behind the wheel and started the engine, but instead of pulling back onto the highway, I drove around to the back of the building where the dumpsters were kept. There was a service road back there, probably used for deliveries. It connected to a county road that ran parallel to Route 15. If I was careful, I could get back on the highway a few miles north without my tail knowing where I'd gone. The plan worked. By the time I merged back onto Route 15, the black SUV was nowhere in sight. I kept checking my mirrors for the next 20 miles, but it never reappeared. Still, the message was clear. Whatever Lora had gotten herself into, it was bigger than an affair. And now, whether I wanted to be or not, I was part of it. I drove north for another 2 hours, putting as much distance as possible between me and whatever was happening back home. Finally, I stopped in a town called Cedar Falls, where I rented a room at a motel that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. The room smelled like cigarettes and disinfectant, but it was clean enough, and the door had a good lock. I sat on the bed and stared at my phone, debating whether to call Lora back. In the end, I turned it off and shoved it in my bag. Whatever she'd gotten herself into, whatever Jay was really about, it wasn't my problem anymore. I'd given her space. Now I was going to use mine. Cedar Falls turned out to be the kind of place where people minded their own business and asked questions later. The motel manager, a guy named Pete with arms like tree trunks and a face that had seen too many bar fights, didn't care that I was paying cash or that I looked like I hadn't slept in 2 days. Weekly rates are cheaper, he said, sliding a registration card across the counter. Monthly rates are even better if you're planning to stick around. I wasn't planning anything beyond getting through the next 24 hours, but I took the weekly rate anyway. It felt like a commitment to something, even if I wasn't sure what. The next morning, I walked into downtown Cedar Falls looking for work. The town was bigger than I'd expected, maybe 15,000 people, with a main street that actually had businesses on it instead of empty storefronts and pawn shops. There was a diner, a hardware store, a couple of bars, and 3 different auto repair shops. The first 2 shops weren't hiring. The third one, Kowalski's Auto Repair, had a hand-lettered sign in the window. Experienced mechanic wanted. Apply within. Frank Kowalski was about 60, with gray hair and hands that were permanently stained with motor oil. He looked at my resume, such as it was, and asked me a few questions about transmissions and electrical systems. Then he pointed to a 1998 Honda Civic with the hood up. Car won't start, he said. The owner says it stopped working on her yesterday. What do you think? I spent 20 minutes poking around under the hood, checking connections and testing components. The problem turned out to be a corroded battery terminal, a 5-minute fix that the owner had probably been quoted $200 to repair somewhere else. "When can you start?" Frank asked. "Now if you want." "I want. Pays $18 an hour to start, $20 after 90 days if you work out. We're closed Sundays, open 7 to 6 Monday through Saturday. You got tools?" I thought about my toolbox back home, sitting in the garage next to Lora's car. Thousands of dollars worth of specialized equipment that I'd collected over 15 years of working on cars. "I'll need to buy some basics." Frank nodded. "There's an advance against your first paycheck if you need it. Good tools are expensive, but they last forever if you take care of them." By the end of the week, I had a job, a routine, and the beginning of something that might eventually become a life. I worked on cars during the day, ate dinner at the diner, and spent my evenings in the motel room watching television or reading paperback novels from the rack in the lobby. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No one was lying to me, cheating on me, or making me feel crazy for trusting my own eyes. The work was honest, the pay was fair, and Frank treated me like a human being instead of an inconvenience. 3 weeks into my new life, I finally turned my phone back on. 47 missed calls from Lora, 23 voicemails, 61 text messages, and 12 calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I deleted everything without listening to it and called Mick. "Holy shit, Connor, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for weeks." "Cedar Falls, working at a garage, keeping my head down. What's going on?" "Laura's been going crazy. She's called me, she's called Janet, she even called my mother asking if we knew where you were. And there's been some weird stuff happening." "What kind of weird stuff?" "Someone broke into your house. Tore the place apart, but as far as Lora can tell, they didn't take anything valuable, just made a mess. And there's been a guy asking questions around town, expensive suit, driving a black SUV, wants to know where you went." The black SUV. So I hadn't been paranoid after all. "What kind of questions?" "Where you might go, who you might stay with, whether you had family in other states." Lora told him she didn't know anything, but the guy didn't seem to believe her. I thought about the text message Lora had sent. "You don't understand what you're getting into." Maybe she'd been trying to warn me, not threaten me. "Mick, I need you to do me a favor. Ask around, see what you can find out about this guy. But be careful about it. Don't let anyone know you're asking for me." "You think you're in some kind of trouble?" "I think Lora got herself into some kind of trouble, and now it's spilling over onto me." After I hung up with Mick, I sat in my motel room and tried to piece together what I knew. Lora was having an affair with someone named Jay. Someone in a black SUV was looking for me. My house had been broken into. None of it made sense unless Jay was more than just some guy Lora was sleeping with. I thought about calling her, demanding answers. But what would be the point? Even if she told me the truth, and that was a big if, it wouldn't change anything. I was done with that life. Done with her lies and drama and games. Let her deal with whatever mess she'd created. I had work to do. 6 months passed before the past found me again. 6 months of honest work, decent pay, and something approaching peace. I'd moved out of the motel and into a small apartment above the hardware store. Nothing fancy, but it was quiet and clean and mine. Frank had given me the raise he'd promised, and I'd started picking up side work on weekends. Word gets around in a small town when someone does good work at fair prices. People started bringing me their cars instead of driving 20 miles to the dealership. I was under the hood of a 2015 Chevy Silverado when Frank called my name. "Connor, you got visitors." I wiped my hands on a rag and walked to the front of the shop. Through the window, I could see 2 people standing by a silver sedan. A woman with dark hair and a man in an expensive-looking jacket. The woman was Lora. She looked different, thinner, more tired. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, and she was wearing clothes I'd never seen before. Designer stuff that probably cost more than I made in a week. The man next to her was tall and lean, with the kind of tan that came from golf courses and vacation homes. His hair was perfectly styled, and his smile was the kind that salesmen practiced in mirrors. I walked outside, keeping my expression neutral. "Lora." "Connor." She looked nervous, uncertain. "You look good. Healthy." "I am. What do you want?" The man stepped forward and extended his hand. "Jared Newell. I've heard a lot about you." So this was Jay? Up close, he looked exactly like what I'd expected. Smooth, confident, and completely sure that his money made him better than everyone else. I didn't shake his hand. "I'm sure you have. What do you want?" "We need to talk," Lora said. "There are some things you need to know." I needed to know things 6 months ago. Now I don't need to know anything except when you're leaving. Jared's smile never wavered. I understand you're upset, Connor. You have every right to be. But this situation has gotten complicated, and we could use your help. My help with what? Lora glanced around nervously. Not here? Can we go somewhere private? I looked at her for a long moment, trying to decide if I cared enough to hear whatever story she'd come to tell. In the end, curiosity won out over common sense. There's a diner down the street. You can buy me coffee and tell me whatever it is you think I need to hear, then you can leave and never come back. The diner was mostly empty at 3 p.m. We took a booth in the back corner, away from the few other customers. Lora ordered coffee she didn't drink. Jared ordered nothing and looked around the place like he was afraid of catching something. So, I said, talk. Lora took a deep breath. Jared owned several businesses around the state. Restaurants, bars, a few other things. I started doing styling work for some of his employees, and we got to know each other. You started sleeping together. I figured that part out already. She flinched. It wasn't supposed to happen. I was confused, unhappy. You were working so much, and we barely talked anymore. So this is my fault? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I made a mistake, a big one. Jared leaned forward. The problem is, Connor, that some of my business associates aren't happy about the situation. They think Lora might have access to information that could be problematic for them. What kind of information? Financial records, client lists, things that could cause trouble if they fell into the wrong hands. I looked at Lora. Do you have access to this information? I don't know, maybe. I was at Jared's office a lot, and I might have seen things. But I wasn't paying attention to business stuff. I was just trying to feel important again. The pieces started falling into place. So, these business associates of yours think my wife might know something she shouldn't know, and they think I might know it too. That's about the size of it, Jared said. And the black SUV that followed me when I left town, the break-in at my house, that was them? Lora's eyes widened. Someone followed you. Connor, why didn't you tell me? When exactly was I supposed to tell you? You were too busy lying about who you were texting to worry about my safety. Jared cleared his throat. The point is, we need to convince these people that neither of you know anything that could hurt them, and the best way to do that is for you to come back home, act like everything is normal, and let them see that you're not a threat. I stared at him for a moment, then started laughing. You want me to come home and pretend that my wife didn't cheat on me so that your criminal friends don't think I'm going to rat them out for crimes I don't even know about? When you put it like that, it sounds ridiculous, Lora said. It sounds ridiculous because it is ridiculous. Here's a better idea. You tell your boyfriend's friends that I don't know anything because I don't know anything. Then you all leave me alone and let me live my life. It's not that simple, Jared said. These people don't trust easily. They need proof. Then give them proof. Take a lie detector test. Show them bank records proving I don't have any money I shouldn't have. I don't care what you do. Just leave me out of it. I stood up to leave, but Lora grabbed my arm. Connor, please. I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve your help. But I'm scared. For a moment, looking at her face, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the lies, the gaslighting, the months of being made to feel crazy for trusting my own instincts. You should have thought about that before you decided to sleep with a guy who has criminal friends. I pulled my arm free and walked out of the diner. Behind me, I heard Lora start to say something, but I didn't stop to listen. Some problems weren't mine to solve anymore. They didn't leave town. I saw the silver sedan parked outside the diner the next morning when I walked to work. It was still there when I went to lunch. By evening, it had moved to the parking lot across from Kowalski's, where Jared sat behind the wheel watching the shop. Friend of yours? Frank asked, nodding toward the car. Ex-wife's boyfriend. They want something I don't have. Frank grunted. He was a man of few words, but he had a way of saying a lot with those few words. This grunt meant he understood and didn't like what he understood. Need me to call somebody? Not yet, but thanks. That night, I came home to find Lora sitting on the steps outside my apartment. She'd been crying, and her makeup was smudged. The designer clothes were wrinkled like she'd been wearing them for days. They won't let me leave, she said without looking up. Who won't let you leave? Jared's friends. They're keeping me at the hotel until this gets resolved. They say I'm a flight risk. I sat down next to her, keeping some distance between us. What exactly did you see, Lora? What information are they so worried about? I don't know. That's the problem. I was at Jared's office a lot, and I saw papers, computer screens, conversations, but I wasn't paying attention to the details. I was just happy to be somewhere that felt exciting and important. Give me an example. What kind of papers? She thought for a moment. Bank statements, lists of names and numbers, Jared talking on the phone about shipments and schedules. But it could have been anything. Restaurant supplies, liquor deliveries, completely legal stuff. But you don't think it was legal stuff? No, the way people acted when I was around, like they were being careful about what they said. And the money. Jared always had so much cash, and he never seemed to work very hard for it. I leaned back against the railing. So, you got involved with a guy who's probably running drugs or laundering money or both, and now his partners think you might know enough to cause them trouble? I think so, and they think you might know because I might have told you. Did you tell me anything? No. We barely talked about anything real for months before you left. That was true enough. Our conversations had become limited to logistics, who was picking up groceries, when the bills were due, whether the garbage had been taken out. We'd been living like roommates who didn't particularly like each other. So what's Jared's plan? Keep you prisoner until his friends decide you're not a threat? He says he's working on it. But Connor, I think he's scared too. I think these people are more dangerous than he thought. A car pulled into the parking lot below us. A black SUV with tinted windows, the same one that had followed me 6 months ago. You need to go, I said, standing up. Connor? Now, Lora, go back to your hotel and stay there. Don't come here again. She looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my voice stopped her. She stood up and walked quickly to her car, not looking back as she drove away. The SUV followed her. I went upstairs and locked my door, then sat by the window watching the street. An hour later, the SUV came back and parked across from my building. Someone was definitely keeping an eye on me. I called Mick. I need a favor, I said when he answered. A big one. Name it. I need you to call Detective Voss. Tell him Connor Delaney is in Cedar Falls, and there are some people asking questions about him that might be worth looking into. Ray Voss had been a year ahead of me in high school. He'd joined the police force right after graduation and worked his way up to detective. We'd never been close friends, but we'd always gotten along. You in some kind of trouble? Mick asked. Lora is, and it's starting to spill over onto me. What kind of trouble? I told him about Jared, the mysterious business associates, and the black SUV that had been following me around. Mick listened without interrupting, which was one of the reasons he was such a good friend. Jesus, Connor, you sure know how to pick them. I didn't pick anything. I just married someone who turned out to be stupider than I thought. What do you want me to tell Voss? Just that there are some people in Cedar Falls asking questions about me, and they might be worth investigating. Don't mention Lora or Jared by name. Let him figure that part out himself. After I hung up, I sat by the window for another hour, watching the SUV. Around midnight, it finally drove away, but I had a feeling it would be back. The next morning, Frank was waiting for me when I got to work. Had some visitors last night, he said. 2 guys in suits asking questions about you. Wanted to know how long you'd been working here, where you lived, whether you seemed nervous about anything. What did you tell them? Told them to get off my property before I called the cops. Frank was about 5'8" and probably weighed 160 soaking wet, but he had the kind of presence that made smart people think twice about pushing him. Apparently these guys were smart enough. They leave? Eventually. But Connor, these don't look like the kind of people who give up easy. He was right, and I was getting tired of being followed, watched, and threatened over something I had nothing to do with. It was time to stop running and start pushing back. Ray Voss called me that afternoon. Mick tells me you've got some new friends in Cedar Falls, he said without preamble. The kind of friends who follow people around and ask a lot of questions. Yeah, I've been hearing about them. Cedar Falls PD isn't happy about having out-of-state muscle operating in their jurisdiction. They asked me to look into it since you're from my neck of the woods. What did you find out? Your friend Jared Newell has some interesting business associates. The kind who launder money through restaurants and bars. The kind who don't like loose ends. Am I a loose end? They think you might be. Question is, are you? I thought about that. I don't think so, but I'm not sure Lora isn't. Where is Lora now? Hotel in Cedar Falls, being watched by Jared's friends until they decide what to do with her. Ray was quiet for a moment. Connor, these people have a reputation for making problems disappear. Permanently. If your ex-wife really does know something that could hurt them, she's in serious danger. Ex-wife? Isn't she? Not officially. We're just separated. Might want to think about making it official. Distance yourself from this mess as much as possible. What about Lora? What about her? She made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Ray was right, but it didn't sit well with me. Lora had lied to me, cheated on me, and made my life miserable for months. But I'd loved her once. Maybe I still did, somewhere underneath all the anger and hurt. Ray, what if I could convince these people that neither of us knows anything worth worrying about? How would you do that? I don't know yet. But if I could, would you be willing to help? Depends what kind of help you're talking about. The kind that makes sure they leave town and don't come back. Ray was quiet again. I'll see what I can do. But Connor, be careful. These aren't the kind of people you want to play games with. That evening, I drove to the hotel where Lora was staying. The silver sedan was in the parking lot, along with the black SUV. I parked next to the sedan and walked into the lobby. Jared was sitting in one of the chairs by the window, reading a newspaper. He looked up when I walked in, and his practiced smile appeared. Connor, I was hoping you'd change your mind. Where's Lora? Room 237, but I'm not sure she wants to see you. You were pretty harsh yesterday. I'm not here to apologize. I walked to the elevator and rode it to the second floor. Room 237 was at the end of the hall. I knocked, and after a moment, Lora opened the door. She looked worse than she had the night before. Her eyes were red from crying, and she was wearing the same clothes. The hotel room behind her was a mess. Clothes scattered around, empty food containers on the table, curtains drawn tight. Connor, what are you doing here? We need to talk. Really talk this time. She let me in and closed the door behind me. I sat in the chair by the window while she perched on the edge of the bed. Tell me exactly what you saw, I said. Everything you can remember, no matter how small or unimportant it seems. For the next hour, Lora told me about her time in Jared's office. The papers she'd seen, the phone calls she'd overheard, the conversations that had stopped when she walked into the room. Most of it was vague, half-remembered details that could have meant anything, but some of it was specific enough to be dangerous. There was a ledger, she said, handwritten, with names and dollar amounts. Some of the amounts were huge, 50,000, 100,000, and the names weren't businesses. They were people's names. Did you recognize any of them? A few. Local politicians, a judge, some businessman I'd seen on the news, people who wouldn't normally be doing business with someone like Jared. Anything else? Phone numbers, bank account numbers. And there was talk about shipments coming in from Florida and going out to Chicago. It sounded like a classic money laundering operation, probably with some drug trafficking on the side. The kind of business that generated millions of dollars and left a lot of bodies in its wake. Lora, do you understand how much trouble you're in? She nodded, tears starting again. I know. I'm so sorry, Connor. I never meant for any of this to happen. Sorry doesn't fix anything, but maybe we can still get you out of this. How? I was quiet for a moment, thinking through the possibilities. What if we could prove to these people that you don't remember the details, that you saw things but didn't understand what they meant? How would we prove that? By giving them something they want more than your silence. Like what? Like Jared. Lora stared at me. What do you mean? I mean Jared's the one who was careless enough to let you see sensitive information. He's the one who created this problem. Maybe his partners would be willing to let you walk away if they had someone to blame for the security breach. You want me to betray Jared? I want you to survive this. And right now, that might mean choosing between Jared and your life. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. Finally, she looked up at me. What would I have to do? First, we need to get you away from here. Somewhere safe where you can think clearly and make decisions without Jared's friends breathing down your neck. They won't let me leave. They will if they think you're going somewhere they can find you. I explained my plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than sitting in a hotel room waiting for Jared's partners to decide her fate. Will you help me? She asked. I looked at her for a long moment. 6 months ago, I would have done anything to save our marriage. Now I was just trying to save her life. Yeah, I said. I'll help you. But not because I loved her anymore, because despite everything she'd done, she didn't deserve to fade for being stupid and naive, and because I was tired of running from other people's problems. It was time to solve this thing once and for all. The next morning, I walked into the hotel lobby like I owned the place. Jared was in his usual spot by the window, but this time he wasn't alone. 2 men in expensive suits sat across from him, their conversation stopping when they saw me. Connor, Jared said, standing up, I wasn't expecting you. We need to talk. All of us. The 2 men looked me over like they were deciding whether I was worth their time. The older one, maybe 50 with silver hair and lifeless eyes, spoke first. You must be the husband. Ex-husband, as of this morning. I filed for divorce. That got their attention. The younger man, built like a linebacker stuffed into a $1,000 suit, leaned forward. Suddenly decided you didn't want to be married anymore. Suddenly decided I didn't want to be connected to this mess anymore. But before I disappear completely, I want to make sure we're all clear on a few things. I sat down without being invited. Lora doesn't know anything useful. She saw papers and heard conversations, but she was too busy playing house with your boy Jared to pay attention to business details. How can you be sure? Silverhair asked. Because I've been married to her for 8 years. She can't balance a checkbook or remember where she put her car keys half the time. You think she was memorizing account numbers and client lists? Linebacker looked skeptical. She was there for months. She had to have picked up something. She picked up a boyfriend and a fantasy about being important. That's it. I pulled out my phone and showed them the divorce papers I'd filed electronically that morning. See? As of today, legally speaking, Lora and I have nothing to do with each other. Whatever she knows or doesn't know, it's not my problem. Jared had been quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke up. What about you, Connor? What do you know? I know you're all idiots for conducting business in front of someone you barely knew. I know Laura's too scared to think straight, which makes her unpredictable. And I know that keeping her locked up in a hotel room is eventually going to attract the wrong kind of attention. Silverhair studied me for a moment. What are you suggesting? Let her go. Give her some money and send her somewhere far away. Make it clear that her health depends on her keeping her mouth shut. Problem solved. And you? I go back to my life in Cedar Falls and pretend none of this ever happened. I don't know you, I never met you, and I have no idea what you're talking about if anyone asks. The two men exchanged glances. Linebacker shook his head slightly, but Silverhair seemed to be considering it. There's just one problem, Silverhair said. How do we know you'll keep your mouth shut? Because I don't know anything worth talking about, and because I'm smart enough to understand what happens to people who cause problems for you. It was a calculated risk, admitting that I knew they were dangerous, but trying to play dumb would have been even riskier. These weren't stupid men, and they could smell fear and deception from a mile away. Plus, I added, I've got a good thing going in Cedar Falls. Steady job, nice apartment, no drama. Why would I want to mess that up? Silverhair nodded slowly. What about the emotional angle? She was your wife. Don't you care what happens to her? She stopped being my wife the minute she started sleeping with him, I said, nodding toward Jared. Now she's just a problem I want to go away. It wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough. And more importantly, it was believable. I need to discuss this with my partner, Silverhair said, standing up. We'll be in touch? The two men walked out of the lobby, leaving me alone with Jared. He looked nervous, which was probably smart of him. Think they bought it? He asked. Doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what they decide to do. Connor, I want you to know that I never meant for things to get this complicated. When Lora and I started, when we got involved, I thought I could keep the business side separate. But you couldn't. No. And now we're all paying for it. I stood up to leave. No, Jared, you're paying for it. I'm just trying to minimize the damage. That afternoon, I drove back to Cedar Falls and waited. Either my plan would work, or it wouldn't. Either way, I'd done everything I could do. Frank was waiting for me when I got to the shop. Your friends were back, he said, asking more questions. What kind of questions? Whether you seemed like the type to hold grudges, whether you talked about your ex-wife recently, whether you seemed angry or bitter. What did you tell them? Told them you seemed like a man who was moving on with his life. Told them you never talked about personal stuff at work, and you seemed happier than when you first got here. Frank had good instincts. Those were exactly the right answers. Thanks. Connor, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but if you need help... I appreciate it, Frank, but I think this is almost over. I hoped I was right. That evening my phone rang. It was Ray Voss. Your friends are packing up, he said. Word is they're leaving town tomorrow. What about Lora? Don't know yet. But Connor, you might want to stay away from her for a while. Let things cool down completely. I'm not planning to see her again. Good. Because if this goes sideways, you don't want to be anywhere near the fallout. The next morning, I watched from my apartment window as the black SUV and the silver sedan pulled out of Cedar Falls. I didn't know if Lora was in one of the cars or if she'd been sent somewhere else, but either way, the immediate threat seemed to be over. I went to work, fixed cars, and tried to get back to the quiet life I'd been building. But I had a feeling this wasn't really over. It was just paused. Cedar Falls had become home in a way that surprised me. The apartment above the hardware store had turned into a comfortable space with furniture I'd chosen and books I actually wanted to read. Frank had made me a partner in the shop after 2 years, and we'd built up a solid reputation for honest work at fair prices. I'd heard from Mick occasionally, but we'd never talked about Lora or what had happened. As far as I knew, she'd disappeared completely after leaving Cedar Falls. The divorce had gone through without any complications, and I'd moved on. Or so I thought. The annual Cedar Falls Street Festival was in full swing when I saw her again. I was manning the booth Frank and I had set up to promote the shop, handing out business cards and talking to potential customers, when a familiar laugh made me look up. Lora was standing about 20 feet away, talking to a group of women near the craft beer tent. She looked older, more tired than I remembered. Her hair was different, longer and darker, and she'd lost weight, but it was definitely her. The man next to her was definitely Jared. He looked worse than she did. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and a polo shirt that had seen better days. His tan had faded, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. Whatever had happened after they left Cedar Falls, it hadn't been kind to either of them. I watched them for a few minutes, trying to decide what to do. They hadn't seen me yet, and part of me wanted to pack up the booth and leave before they did. But a bigger part of me was curious about what had brought them back. The decision was made for me when Lora turned around and our eyes met across the crowd. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she said something to Jared and started walking toward me. He followed, looking nervous. "Connor," she said when she reached the booth. We didn't know you were still here." "It's a good town, good people, honest work. Why wouldn't I be here?" Jared stepped forward, extending his hand like we were old friends meeting at a high school reunion. "Connor, you look well?" I didn't shake his hand. "Jared, you look like hell." His smile faltered. "Yeah, well, it's been a rough few years." "Sorry to hear that." Lora was staring at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "You seem different, happier." "I am happier. Turns out life's a lot easier when people aren't lying to you all the time." She flinched. "Connor, I know I hurt you. I know I don't have any right to ask, but could we talk? Privately?" I looked around the festival. There were plenty of people nearby, but no one was paying attention to our conversation. Still, this wasn't the place for whatever she wanted to say. "There's a diner on Main Street. Molly's. Meet me there in an hour." "What about me?" Jared asked. "What about you? Shouldn't I be part of this conversation?" "No. Whatever Lora wants to talk about, it's between her and me. You can wait in the car." Jared's face darkened, but he didn't argue. He was smart enough to know he wasn't in a position to make demands. An hour later, I walked into Molly's and found Lora sitting in a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She looked up when I sat down across from her. "Thank you for coming." "What do you want, Lora?" "I wanted to apologize. For everything. For the lies, the cheating, for getting you involved in that mess with Jared's business associates." "Okay. You've apologized. Anything else?" She looked hurt by my coldness, but she pressed on. "I also wanted to explain what happened after we left Cedar Falls." "I don't need an explanation." "Maybe not, but I need to give one." I signaled the waitress for coffee and settled back in the booth. "Fine, talk." For the next 30 minutes, Lora told me about the past 3 years. How Jared's partners had decided he was a liability and cut him out of the business. How they'd been forced to leave the state and start over with nothing. How they'd moved from town to town, taking whatever work they could find, always looking over their shoulders. "We came back here because we're broke," she said finally. "Jared heard about some construction work, and we hoped that enough time had passed." "Have you seen any of Jared's old friends?" "No, we've been careful to stay away from that part of the state. But Connor, I'm scared. Jared's been drinking more, and he's angry all the time. He blames me for everything that went wrong." "Is he right to blame you?" She was quiet for a moment. "Partly. I was careless. I saw things I shouldn't have seen, and I didn't understand how dangerous that was." "So why are you telling me this? What do you want from me?" "I don't know. Maybe just to have someone know the truth. Maybe to hear you say that you don't hate me." I looked at her for a long moment. 3 years ago, I would have done anything to help her. I would have taken her back, forgiven her, tried to rebuild what we'd had. Now, all I felt was a mild curiosity about how this story would end. "I don't hate you, Lora, but I don't love you either. You're just someone I used to know who made some bad decisions." Tears started in her eyes. "That's it? 8 years of marriage, and that's all I am to you now? That's all you chose to be when you decided to lie to me and cheat on me? Connor, please. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but you're right. You don't deserve it, and I'm not offering it." I stood up and dropped a $5 bill on the table for my coffee. "Good luck, Lora. I hope you figure out whatever it is you're looking for." I walked out of the diner and back to the festival, where Frank was still manning our booth. He looked up when I approached. Everything okay? Yeah, just ran into someone from my past. The past has a way of showing up when you least expect it. That it does. But sometimes the past isn't as important as you thought it was. Frank nodded. Sometimes the best thing you can do with the past is leave it there. I spent the rest of the afternoon at the festival, talking to customers and enjoying the music. I didn't see Lora or Jared again, and I didn't go looking for them. But I had a feeling this wasn't the last I'd see of them. And I was right. 2 weeks after the festival, Frank and I were closing up the shop when a beat-up Honda Civic limped into our parking lot, steam pouring from under the hood. The driver got out, and I recognized him immediately. Jared looked even worse than he had at the festival. His clothes were dirty, his hair was unwashed, and he had the shaky look of someone who'd been drinking too much for too long. "Connor," he said, walking toward me. "I need help." "Radiator's probably blown," I said, nodding toward his car. "It'll cost more to fix than the car's worth." "Not with the car, with Lora." Frank looked between us, sensing the tension. "I'll lock up," he said. "You handle this." After Frank left, I turned back to Jared. "What about Lora?" "She's gone. Left me 3 days ago, took what little money we had and disappeared." "Good for her?" "You don't understand. She's in danger. Those people from before, they're back. They found us." That got my attention. "What people?" "Torino and his crew. They tracked us down last week, said they'd been looking for us for 3 years." "What do they want?" "Same thing they wanted before, to make sure Lora can't cause them any problems." "I thought that was settled." "So did we, but apparently someone's been asking questions about their operation. Federal agents, maybe state police. They think Lora might have talked to someone." "Did she?" "No, but try convincing them of that." I leaned against my truck, thinking. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want me to do about it?" "Help me find her. She doesn't have anywhere to go. No money, no friends. She's probably scared and desperate." "And you think she'll come to me?" "I think she might. You're the only person who ever really cared about her. Used to care about her. Past tense." Jared stepped closer, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "Connor, please. Whatever you think of me, Lora doesn't deserve to fade for this." "No, she doesn't. But she also doesn't deserve to be saved by me. She made her choices." "What if I could make it worth your while?" "How?" "I know where Torino keeps his records. Real records, not the fake books he shows to the IRS, account numbers, client lists, everything Lora saw, and more." "Why would I want that information?" "Because it's leverage. Because it's the one thing that could keep Lora safe permanently." I stared at him for a moment. "You're talking about blackmail." "I'm talking about survival." "And what makes you think I'd risk my life for information that might not even exist anymore?" "Because despite everything, you still care about her. I saw it in your eyes at the diner." He was wrong, but not completely wrong. I didn't love Lora anymore, but I didn't want her gone either. And if there was a way to end this thing permanently, maybe it was worth considering. "Where is this information?" "Torino's got an office above his restaurant in Millbrook. Safe behind a painting. Combination is his daughter's birthday." "How do you know all this?" "Because I used to be his partner. Because I helped him set up that office. Because I'm the idiot who thought I could trust him." I thought about it for a minute. It was a stupid plan with a dozen ways to go wrong, but it was also the only plan that might actually solve the problem instead of just postponing it. "If I do this," I said, "it's not for you, and it's not because I want Lora back. It's because I'm tired of looking over my shoulder." "I understand. And if this goes bad, you're on your own. I'm not going down for your mistakes." "Fair enough." "Where's Torino now?" "Still looking for Lora. He's got people watching the bus station, the truck stops, anywhere she might try to leave town." "And you think she's still in Cedar Falls?" "I think she's hiding somewhere nearby. She doesn't have enough money to get far." That night, I drove around Cedar Falls looking for Lora. I checked the cheap motels, the all-night diner, the 24-hour laundromat where desperate people sometimes spent the night. I didn't find her, but I did see 2 cars that didn't belong, a black sedan and a gray pickup truck, both with out-of-state plates. Torino's people were definitely in town. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Millbrook. Torino's restaurant was called Giuseppe's, and it looked exactly like what it was, a front operation trying too hard to look legitimate. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars that probably belonged to staff. I parked across the street and watched the building for an hour. People went in and out, but none of them looked like customers. This was definitely a business operation, not a restaurant. Around noon, I saw Torino himself come out of the building and get into a silver Mercedes. He was older than I'd expected, maybe 60, with gray hair and the soft look of a man who'd been living well for a long time. After he left, I waited another 30 minutes, then walked around to the back of the building. There was a service entrance with a simple lock that took me about 2 minutes to pick, a skill I'd learned as a teenager and never expected to use again. The stairs to the second floor were narrow and creaky. The office door was unlocked, which should have been my first warning that something was wrong. The second warning was the man sitting behind the desk, pointing a gun at me. "Connor Delaney," he said. "Right on time." The man with the gun was younger than Torino, maybe 40, with the kind of build that came from prison workouts and too much anger. His smile was the kind that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to a chair across from the desk. I sat down, keeping my hands visible and my mouth shut. When someone's pointing a gun at you, the smart play is to let them talk first. "My name's Vincent Torino. Tony's my uncle. He told me someone might come looking for his files." "I'm not looking for anything. You're just breaking into my uncle's office for fun? Come on, Connor. We know Jared sent you. Question is, what did he promise you?" There was no point in lying. He said there were records here that could keep Lora safe. "And you believed him?" "I thought it was worth checking out." Vincent laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "You know what's funny? There actually are records here. Names, numbers, everything your ex-wife saw and more. But they're not in any safe behind a painting." He opened the desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "They're right here. And you know what else is funny? We've been waiting 3 years for someone to come looking for them." "I don't understand." "Sure you do. You're a smart guy, Connor. You figured out that Lora was a problem, that she knew too much. So you divorced her, moved away, started a new life. But you knew eventually someone would have to clean up the mess. That's not what? Not true? Come on. You think we didn't check you out? You think we don't know about your new life in Cedar Falls, your partnership in the garage, your nice quiet existence?" Vincent stood up, still holding the gun. "Here's what I think happened. I think you got tired of waiting for us to solve the Lora problem. I think you decided to take matters into your own hands." "You're wrong." "Am I? Then explain why you're here, in my uncle's office, looking for leverage to use against us." I thought fast. Vincent had the wrong idea about my motivations, but arguing with him wasn't going to help. What I needed was to find a way out of this room with all my body parts still attached. "You want to know the truth?" I said. "Fine, I don't care what happens to Lora. I haven't cared for 3 years. But I'm tired of your people following me around, asking questions about me, making me look over my shoulder." "So you thought you'd blackmail us into leaving you alone?" "I thought I'd find out what kind of leverage existed and decide what to do with it." Vincent considered this for a moment. "And now that you know? Now I think we can make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "The kind where everyone gets what they want. You get Lora, I get left alone, and everyone goes back to their normal lives." "You'd sell out your ex-wife?" "She stopped being my wife when she started sleeping with your uncle's partner. Now she's just a problem. I want to go away." It was the same line I'd used 3 years ago, and it had worked then. But Vincent was smarter than his uncle's other employees, and he wasn't buying it completely. Prove it," he said. "How?" "Call her. Tell her you want to meet, that you found a way to help her. When she shows up, we'll be waiting." I thought about it. If I refused, Vincent would probably shoot me and dump my body somewhere it would never be found. If I agreed, I'd be setting up Lora to be eliminated. Or would I? "I'll need my phone," I said. Vincent gestured with the gun. Slowly. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I didn't have Lora's number anymore, but I had an idea where she might be. Instead of calling Lora, I called the Cedar Falls Police Department. "Cedar Falls Police, this is Officer Martinez. This is Connor Delaney. I need to speak to Detective Ray Voss. Tell him it's about the Torino investigation." Vincent's eyes widened, and he started to raise the gun. But he was too late. The office door burst open, and 3 men in FBI windbreakers poured into the room. Vincent spun toward them, but one of the agents was already on him, knocking the gun out of his hand and slamming him face first into the desk. "Vincent Torino, you're under arrest," one of the agents said, pulling out handcuffs. I looked at the lead agent, a woman in her 40s with gray hair and tired eyes. "Agent Sarah Chen, FBE. You must be Connor Delaney." "How did you—" "We've been watching this place for weeks, waiting for someone to make a move. When we saw you go in, we decided to follow." "What about Lora?" "She's safe. We picked her up yesterday and offered her protective custody in exchange for her testimony." "She's cooperating?" "She's been cooperating for 3 years, ever since she contacted us after leaving Cedar Falls." I stared at her. "What?" "Your ex-wife has been working with us since 2021, Mr. Delaney. She provided us with the initial information that started this investigation. But Jared said what we told him to say. He's been working for us too, ever since we arrested him 6 months ago on drug charges. The pieces started falling into place. So this whole thing, Lora being in danger, needing my help, was designed to get you to lead us to Vincent and the records we needed to complete our case against the Torino organization. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. You used me. We gave you a chance to help bring down the people who had been threatening you. I'd say that's a fair trade. Vincent was being led out of the office in handcuffs, still cursing and struggling. Agent Chen watched him go, then turned back to me. The Torino organization is finished, Mr. Delaney. You can go back to your life in Cedar Falls without worrying about looking over your shoulder. What about Lora? What about her? Where is she now? That's not really your concern anymore, is it? Agent Chen was right. Lora wasn't my concern anymore. She hadn't been for 3 years, but I still needed to know. I'd like to see her, to say goodbye properly this time. Agent Chen studied my face for a moment, then nodded. She's at a safe house outside town. I can arrange a meeting, but it will have to be brief. An hour later, I was sitting in the living room of a small house on the outskirts of Cedar Falls. Lora came in wearing jeans and a sweater I'd never seen before. She looked better than she had at the festival, healthier, more confident. Hello, Connor. Hello, Lora. She sat down across from me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I'm sorry, she said finally, for lying to you again, for using you. Did you ever love me, or was that a lie too? I loved you. I still love you in a way, but I wasn't in love with you anymore, and I was too much of a coward to admit it. So you cheated instead. So I cheated instead. And when I realized what Jared was involved in, I panicked. I thought if I cooperated with the FBI, I could protect both of us. Why didn't you just tell me the truth? Because I was afraid you'd try to stop me, or worse, that you'd want to help. I thought about that. She was probably right. 3 years ago, I would have tried to protect her, even if it meant putting myself in danger. What happens now? I asked. I testify against the Torinos, then I go into witness protection. New name, new life, new everything. Are you okay with that? I'm okay with being alive. We sat in silence for another minute. Then I stood up. I should go. Connor? Yeah? For what it's worth, you're a good man. You deserved better than what I gave you. Yeah, I said. I did. I walked out of the safe house and drove back to Cedar Falls. Frank was waiting for me at the shop, along with a stack of work orders and the comfortable routine of fixing things that could actually be fixed. That night, I sat in my apartment and thought about the past 3 years. About the life I'd built, the peace I'd found, the person I'd become when I stopped trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work. I'd fix cars, talk to customers, and live the quiet life I'd chosen. And for the first time in 8 years, I wouldn't have to wonder what Lora was doing or who she was doing it with. It was over. Finally, completely, permanently over. And I was free.